Okay, so there was one time when I was like 9 or 10 years old. This is gonna sound so stupid. I was singing in a lake and some chick came up to me and was like, "Hey dude, you need a record deal. Let's see if I actually deserve one." Showtime! Let it go! Let it go! Let it go! Let it go! Yeah, I think this record deal is gonna pan out. Frozen 2 is the sequel to 2013's Frozen. Frozen was a huge hit. It even had a huge hit song, Let It Go, that I just imitated in the cold open. In Frozen 2, Elsa, Kristoff, Sven, Olaf, and Anna venture into the forest land, and after Elsa hears the sound of a siren, they embark on an adventure to find out the origin of Elsa's powers. As I said, Frozen was a huge hit. It made over $1 billion worldwide in the box office, and again, it had that hit song, Let It Go. Almost every song from Frozen is memorable, especially Let It Go. So there was no doubt in my mind that Frozen was going to get a sequel. If Wreck-It Ralph gets a sequel, if Moana is going to get a sequel, Frozen's got to get a sequel somehow. And so now we have Frozen 2. And Frozen 2 is a solid sequel. It's a watchable sequel. It's nothing unbearable, but there is a bit of a slight disappointment for me because I expected this to be a little bit better than it actually was. That doesn't mean that this movie's bad by any means. I do think it is solid. I think it's still watchable. There's just some really big issues that I have with this movie. But with almost all my reviews, I usually give mixed or positive reviews to. I am going to get into the positives first, and that is the voice acting. Kristen Bell, Josh Gad, Idina Menzel, all really good. And they add layers to their characters. You can actually get a sense of what their characters are feeling based on the way they're acting. There's a lot that goes into voice work, and it's on full display in this movie. The animation, as I've said for pretty much every animation movie that I've seen this year, probably the lone exception would be like Arctic Dogs or something, because I haven't seen Arctic Dogs. Don't even... Why? Animation is very smooth. There's nothing here that stands out in terms of glitches or bad rendering. There's a nitpick that I have, and it's a couple instances where it feels like the mouths don't match up with the words the characters are actually saying. It's a small thing. It's nothing to, freak out about. I mean, I think that's bound to happen with animation, especially in video games. I see it all the time in video games, so it's really nothing to freak out over. But the animation is really smooth. The color palette's very vibrant. I think the animation is even taken to new levels in terms of character movements, stuff we see on screen. It's just so well realized, and a lot of that has to do with the beautiful, lush scenery that we get. The cinematography, outstanding in this movie. I felt like I was actually in this world at times, and this world is expanded upon with a lot of mythology. This story feels rich at times, and it feels engrossing at times, which makes you feel like you're part of that world. At times, when it can get overwhelming, it really doesn't make all that much sense. You gotta give them credit for trying to expand the powers that the character of Elsa has and where this stuff comes from, and the more you learn about it, it's like, oh, that's actually kind of intriguing and kind of interesting. So I wanted them to delve a little bit more into that. And with that expansion of lore comes the delving into darker themes in this movie. This is a darker movie than the first one. This has a lot of dark elements to it, a lot of dark themes that I think are portrayed beautifully on screen. This is definitely a more mature movie for a more mature audience, I would say. I wouldn't say even bring like a 3-year-old to this. I think 8-year-olds and up. Like, there were some like 6-year-olds, and I think there were some 6-year-olds that were getting a little too freaked out in some parts in my theater. I was like, yeah, maybe this might be a little bit too much for them. Really enjoyed those darker themes. I liked how they just kind of went for it and really thought about the adult audience when it came to that. Because when it comes to animation, you have to please both the adults and the kids. I think they did both very well. They appealed to the kids, especially in the humor side, because I didn't really laugh all that much in this movie. I think the humor was kind of a downgrade from the first one. But with those darker themes, you have to keep the actual adults that are there with their kids engaged in the movie, and you have to have some semblance of a story. Kids aren't going to follow the story at all, but adults, yeah, you're going to follow this story. It's going to be easy to pick up the clues and where the story's going if you're an adult. I guess that's my way of saying it's a bit predictable, but maybe not that predictable. Now we get into my negatives with the movie, because this movie has a clear lack of a main villain. There is a villain problem in this movie. If you think there's a villain problem in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, this movie has it. From what I understand, there is no main villain. They hint at a main villain about an hour and 10 minutes into the movie, which for a movie that's an hour and 43 minutes long, that is way too long to wait to introduce a villain. But they don't really go anywhere in that route. And right when it was getting interesting, where I was like, oh, that's kind of how they expand the lore, the mythology of this actual story, of this actual world. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. They kind of just throw any notion of a main villain out the window. While the movie still had stakes, if there was an actual villain in the movie, the stakes would have been higher. I would have actually cared a little bit more about Elsa and Anna and their journey. And people will argue that the story doesn't call for a main villain, but I think if you had that presence there, that would have made for some really unique obstacles. It would have made their journey a lot more tedious, and I wanted to see a more tedious journey. Sometimes, because there was no villain, it felt like that this journey was a bit easy. That's why I just wanted there to be a villain in this movie. The argument's there that, yeah, the story doesn't really call for it, and it is a bit unique that there is no villain, but for me, I just felt the stakes would have been higher if there actually was a villain. Characters also do stuff in this movie that makes no sense. You start to question whether or not they break character, and there's some instances in this movie. What is happening? This defies logic. There's a couple instances in this movie where I was questioning the characters. I was like, this defies any logic. This goes against what your sisterly bond and your friendship is all about with these characters. I learned a lot from the first one. Try to carry all of that over into this movie, only to break all that. That doesn't really make that much sense to me. And then characters end up at point A to point A.9 without getting to point B, and it just doesn't really make any sense. It's just, why? It gets you really thinking. It's intriguing that you're doing that, but it's intriguing in the way you don't want it to be intriguing. I feel like there's a lot of questions they raise that they think they answer in this movie that they don't fully answer. And of course, like the first one, this is a musical, so it's going to have a lot of songs. It's going to have a huge soundtrack. There are songs in this, honestly, aren't that memorable. One that I've been hearing that is really good, that a lot of people like, is Into the Unknown, which is a good song, but it's one of those songs that just, it escapes your mind right after you hear it. I feel like that's what happens in any animated Disney movie that has songs. You compare them to the original. The ones in the sequels just escape your mind. It's like this. A band releases a 12-song album. The first 6 songs are all singles. They're really good. That's the first Frozen movie. The second half of the album is either potential singles or all filler. That's Frozen 2. That's the best way to describe it. And the way some story beats play out and the way some songs are staged, the overall feel of the actual movie felt more like a Broadway play to me, that somebody decided that they wanted to adapt for the big screen and animate. There were multiple instances where I had that feeling. I was sitting in the theater and I said to myself, I'm watching a Broadway play right now. This is what this feels like. This feels like Disney on Ice. There's other times where it feels like an actual movie, but sometimes how the songs are staged and how they follow the characters in these songs, it feels more like a Broadway play or a stage play than it does an actual movie. That's gonna sound like I bitched about Frozen 2, but I do think it is a solid sequel, yet slightly disappointing. This is by no means a bad movie. I still really enjoyed myself. I still had fun with the movie. While Frozen is a near-perfect movie, this comes nowhere close to matching the heights of the original Frozen. I wasn't really expecting it to. I was expecting it to be a little bit better than this, though. I'm going to give Frozen 2 a B-. Definitely check it out if you have kids. I think the kids will enjoy it for the most part, although they might tune out towards the middle. It starts to get a little bit slow towards the middle and starts to feel a bit familiar, especially in terms of what happens in the first one. So your kids might tune out if you take them to see this. Thank you for watching my review of Frozen 2. I will be starting a review series of 2 classic franchises coming very soon. Stay tuned for those reviews. What did you guys think of Frozen 2? Leave me a comment in the comment section below. I will leave my link to my social media accounts in the description below as well. You guys are the best. Thank you for watching. My name is Alex Madden, and I'll see you at the movies somewhere.